This conference will now be recorded.
So in the previous session, we have discussed about force.com platform, and we have discussed what exactly the force.com platform and what we can do with the help of force.com platform and what kind of features provided by Salesforce as part of force.com platform, and we have discussed what programming languages are available, and we have identified Salesforce offers two programming languages as part of this force.com platform. First one, Apex programming. Second one, Visual Force programming. In yesterday, we have discussed what exactly Apex programming and what is the use, what we can do with the help of Apex programming language we have discussed in the previous session. Now, so now today we'll see Apex programming execution lifecycle. So how an Apex program will get executes internally, what are the various components will get involved upon executing an Apex program, and what is the functionality of each component, and how can we write that Apex programming code, and where this Apex programming code will get resides, and what will be the extensions of those files generating by Salesforce. We can now let's see one by one. Then we will be digging into the concept of fundamental basics of Apex programming language. Okay, now let's see Apex programming execution lifecycle. So how an Apex program will get executes internally? Now let me explain. Generally, when you go to any programming language, not only Apex, you can go to any programming language also. It may be C also, C++, Java, C Sharp, Python, any programming language, whatever we have in IT industry, for each programming language, we are having two separate components are available which will get involved upon execution. Upon execution of those programs, two components will be getting involved. First one, compiler component. Second one, runtime engine component. Okay, first one, compiler. Second one, runtime engine. So then what do you mean by this compiler? What do you mean by this runtime engine? Now let's see. So basically, the compiler will take care of compiling the code. Compiling the code means what? Whatever the statements you have written, whatever the logic we have written, whatever the code that we have written by using that programming language. So in that code, do we have any syntactical mistakes exist or not? We need to verify. Like for example, assume that today I want to send an email to my project manager or technical lead or to anybody. So I have prepared some content over here. So once content is ready, which you would like to send, before sending the content, before click on send button, first of all, we will verify whether in this content sentence formation is correct or not. Do we have any grammatical mistakes are available or not? We are checking sentence by sentence over here. If the whole content is correct, then we can send the email to the people. Like the similar way, whenever we are writing some code by using that programming language, in that code there may be some syntactical mistakes because we are the human beings. We are not the robots to write the 100% exact code. So each programming language is having its own rules, its own principles, its own guidelines, its own standards, its own limitations also. So, upon writing the code inside that programming language, we have to consider all those principles and the rules and everything. Like yesterday, we have discussed a small principle in Apex programming language. So, whenever we are writing the code in Apex programming language, each statement in Apex programming should be ends with a semicolon. Every line should be ends with a semicolon. Like upon writing the code in our normal real world, each sentence should be ends with a full stop because to indicate that the full stop is indicating this is the end of the sentence. From here, next sentence will get started. Like the similar way, this semicolon is indicating this is the end of this statement, and then from there, next sentence will get started. So that as part of Apex programming, each sentence or each statement should be ends with a semicolon. That is a rule. So in that case, while writing the code, there might be some mistakes may be available. It's my mistake. So for one of the line, I forgot to specify the semicolon. I did not specify the semicolon. It's my mistake. I know that every statement should be ends with a semicolon, but by mistake it happened. I did not return the semicolon for one line. In that case, we need to check those kind of syntactical mistakes first. So that here, in order to verify each and every line code, whatever the statements that you have written, each and every statement syntax will be verified by the compiler over here. So, when coming to the programming languages, each programming language will be having its own compiler, where the compiler is going to be verifying the syntactical mistakes. Okay? Now, second one, runtime engine. Suppose if the code has been compiled perfectly, that means if there is no syntactical mistakes available, immediately we can able to send the code to the runtime engine. Now the runtime engine will execute that code. Okay. In order to compile, we are using compiler component. In order to execute the code, we are using runtime engine. These are the two components are available here. Clear? Now, when you go to the programming languages, every programming language is having these two components mandatorily. Suppose when you go to the Java programming, Java is having a compiler called as Java C. Java C is a compiler. Java C means Java compiler. In order to execute that code, Java is having a runtime engine called as JVM, Java Virtual Machine. So which will be executing your Java programming code. Now, when you go to that C Sharp.NET, it is having its own compiler that is called as CSC. CSC is the compiler here, C Sharp compiler. It is having a runtime engine that is called as JIT, just in time. Okay, just in time compiler, which will be executing the code. Suppose when you go to that VB.NET, it is having a compiler called as VBC, Visual Basic Compiler. It is having the runtime engine called as JIT compiler. Both are from okay, .NET supported platforms. When you go to your Apex programming language, here we are having that Apex compiler. For the runtime engine, we are having Apex runtime engine. We have Apex runtime engine. Now, so these are the components will be getting involved upon compilation, upon execution of your code. Compiler will take care of only the compilation. Compilation means simply it will verify the syntactical mistakes inside your code. Whatever the code we have written, you may be returning some one line of code, 100 lines of code, line by line, it will check the syntax. If you have any syntactical mistakes are available, immediately it will stop compiling the code, it will show the error message. Boss, inside your code, we have identified this kind of syntactical mistakes. So please modify the code and please resubmit the code for recompilation process. Suppose inside your code, if you don't have any syntactical mistakes, then it will be indicating that compilation has been success. Then it will send the code to the runtime engine. in order to execute that code so that we can see the results. Okay, these are the two components will be getting involved now. So now let's see how your Apex program will get executed internally, and then what kind of components will get involved. Now let's see one by one. Let's see the Apex programming execution lifecycle. So this is the Apex programming execution lifecycle here. So now let me explain, okay, how your Apex program will get compiled, how it will get executes, where it will save, everything we'll see one by one. Now let's see. Suppose for example, assume that I'm a developer. Okay, I'm a Salesforce developer. I'm working for a company, some TCS. Okay, I'm working for a company, some TCS. I'm working as a developer. Assume that he is my technical lead. Okay, he is my technical lead. Every day he is assigning some tasks to me. I'm working on those tasks. I'm going to be handovering that code to my technical lead by end of the day. I'm updating my status to my manager here. Now, today, my technical lead has given a small requirement to me related to our project. He asked me, Firoz, this is a new requirement here from the client. It's related to development. Till now, he has assigned so many admin related tasks. I have completed those tasks. Today, he is assigning a development related task. So, this is a development related task. You have to write some piece of code through Apex programming language, write the code, compile the code, test the code, and hand over the code to me by today night. But today evening, we need to hand over this code to the client. So now, my technical lead has requested me to implement this requirement. So as a developer, it's my responsibility that I need to follow. Okay, I need to follow the orders of my technical lead. Now, so now here, based on the requirement, I have written some piece of code. Okay, I have written some piece of code. So this is my role over here. This is my role. I'm a developer here. As a developer, it's my responsibility. I need to follow the orders of my technical lead based on the requirement, okay, given by my technical lead. I have started working on the code. So I would like to write that code. In order to write the code, okay, what kind of editor we need to use? Where we need to write the code? Where we need to write? Inside a notepad document? Inside an editor? Or where? Generally, if it is a C programming, it is having its own editor, like a Turbo C editor. For C++, Turbo C++ editor. For Java, people are writing the code by using a tool called as, okay, Eclipse. That is called as Integrated Development Environment, IDE. Or else, people are writing the code by using a normal notepad also, or the people are using an editor called as Edit Plus. When you go to the .NET people, those people are having a separate IDE, Visual Studio IDE is available. But as a Salesforce developer, where we can write the code. So in that case, when coming to the Salesforce, we don't have any IDEs from Salesforce. We don't have any local environments. In order to write that code, Salesforce has given few cloud-based editors. Salesforce has given few cloud-based editors that is called as a developer console or execute anonymous window. So we have these two cloud-based editors, so which can be accessible from your Salesforce or just with the help of browser and the internet access. With the help of browser and the internet access, we can access these two editors. Okay, developer console or execute anonymous window. So we are using the developer console. I'm writing some piece of code. So this is the piece of code I'm writing over here. So this is a piece of code I'm writing right now. I'm using the cloud-based editor that is called as a developer console. In this developer console, I'm writing some piece of code by using Apex programming language. So whatever the requirement they have given to me based on the requirement I have written some business logic over here through Apex programming. Now, so in this case, whatever the Apex programming code that you have prepared, that code will be storing inside a file, right? Yes. Suppose if it is a C program, it will be storing inside a file with the extension .c. If it is a C++, it will be storing the code inside a file with the extension .cpp. If it is a Java related code, it will store with the extension .java. Like the similar way, when you go to your Apex programming, whatever the business logic you are going to write, whatever the classes you are going to prepare, each Apex class code will stored inside a file with the extension .apxc. APXC means Apex class, C means class. Okay, now, so in this case, each Apex programming code should be get stored inside a file with the extension .apxc. This is the standard notation following by Salesforce here. Now, whatever the Apex code that you have written, that Apex code will be storing inside the file with the extension .apxc. Now, so now here once the code has been placed inside the file, as soon as once you click on this save button, immediately a request will be sending to the force.com platform. Because that already told you from the beginning of our Salesforce, keep on I'm telling you, we don't have anything in our local system to compile, to execute, to see the results. Everything will be available inside the browser itself. Nothing will be there in our local system. Code will not be saving into my local system. Code will not be compiling in my local system. Code will not be executing in my local system. We can't see the results in my local system. My local system is just a dummy system to connect to the internet. So everything we can able to operatable with the help of browser. So we need browser internet access. That's it. So now in this case, after writing the code, as soon as once you click on this save button, this code will be sending to the force.com platform. This code is uncompiled code. That means this code is not yet compiled. It's a not yet compiled. We haven't verified do we have any syntactical mistakes available in my code or not. So that here my code is not yet compiled. That's what this is the uncompiled Apex programming code, which will be sending to the force.com platform as a request. Okay, because the code should be compiled from force.com platform, not in my local system. Okay, not in my local system. So force.com platform is available where inside the Salesforce server. Where is that Salesforce server? Somewhere in US or UK or Germany, Japan, whatever. So that here my uncompiled code will be sending to the force.com platform as a request. Now, when you go to the code to the force.com platform, immediately the force.com platform will be stopping this code at the entry itself. It will stop the code at the entry itself. It won't allow this code to be entered into the force.com platform. It will stop the code at the entry itself. It will be informing to the code boss, please wait for some time. I need to do some necessary investigations. Now, so in this case here, whatever the code that we have written, as soon as once you click on that save button, this uncompiled code will be sending to the force.com platform. Force.com platform will stop the code at the entry itself to do the necessary investigation. Now, in this particular code, it will verify which user has prepared this code. It will check it out. Okay, it will prepare, it will identify the user information, which user has initiated this code. It will collect the username, it will verify whatever the username that we have, with this username, do we have a user is exist or not? If the user is exists, it will check whether the user is in active status or not. We know how to verify a user is active, inactive, how to deactivate, how to freeze, how to unfreeze, how to reactivate, everything we have discussed during security. Now, it will check whether the user is in active status or not. If the user is in active status, then it will go to the user's profile. It will go to that user's profile, and in that user profile, it will check for a permission that is called as other apex. It will check for the permission other apex. That means whether this user is having the permission of other apex or not. So what is this other apex here? Now let's see. Now tell me generally other in the sense what? Other means the person who prepared that book, the person who prepared that product also, anything. Now, in this case, other apex permission means what? Whatever the current user that we have who prepared this code, whether this user is having this permission to create apex classes or not. That means other means what? The person who can prepare. Now, other apex means what? Whether this person can be in other of an apex class, whether this person can be preparing some apex class or not. To check the permissions that already we know. Each user should be associated with a profile. In that profile, we can specify so many permissions that already we have discussed. Okay, now, so in this case, as soon as once you click on this save button, immediately this uncompiled code will be sending to the force.com platform. Now the force.com platform will stop the request at the initial entry gate itself. It will be verifying the necessary investigations. It will check that user information, which user has initiated the code. It will check whether the user is active or not. If yes, it will go to the user's profile. It will check whether the user is having other Apex permission is available or not. Suppose if the user is having this permission inside the profile, then the request will be considered over here. Then the request will be considered. So the request will be entering into that force.com platform. Request will be entering into that force.com platform. Or else it won't allow. Directly the request will not be accepting by the force.com platform, because if it is accepting the request directly, then unauthorized people or hacker people directly they can enter into the force.com platform. They can do some malfunctionings, they can corrupt your data also. For that reason, force.com platform will do this kind of necessary investigations here before accepting the code into that force.com platform. So now once the request has been entered into the force.com platform, in this force.com platform, we have two components are available. We have two components. First one, an application server. Second one, a metadata repository. We have two components are available. An application server and the second one, a metadata repository. So what do you mean by application server? What it will do? What is metadata repository? What it will do? Now let's see. Basically, application server's main responsibility is it has to compile the code, it has to execute the code. In order to compile the code, okay, to check line by line syntaxes, whatever the components are required, those components will be available inside that okay, application server. And along with that, to execute that code, whatever the runtime engines are required, those are also available inside it. That means application server will mainly take care of compiling the code and executing the Apex programming code. Okay. Now, the second one, metadata repository. Generally, repository means what? A place or a location where we can store some information, where we can store some data. Basically, here, metadata repository is a place where exactly all your compiled Apex code. That means whatever the Apex programming code that you have prepared, the compiled Apex code, that means a verified code, and it will be called as error-free code or bug-free code or quality code will be residing inside the metadata repository. So metadata repository is a location where exactly all your compiled Apex classes, Apex triggers, Visual Force pages, batch classes, schedule classes, web services, APIs, all these things will be getting resides inside this over here. Okay. So metadata repository is a place where exactly all the compiled Apex classes and triggers, Visual Force pages, and then our web services, APIs, batch classes, scheduled classes, everything will be getting resides over here. That means the code which we are going to prepare, that code is not saving in my local system. That code will be storing where? Inside the force.com platform. That means inside the Salesforce server in metadata repository, the code is getting saved, not in my local system. That's what I told you. My local system is just a dummy system. Nothing will be there. We no need to install. Everything will be getting compiled and executed and stored inside that Force.com platform, which is available in the Salesforce server. So our local system is just a dummy system to connect. Now, so in this case here, these are the two components will be getting involved. We have application server, we have metadata repository. Now let's see. So now as part of this request, once a request has been accepted by that Post.com platform, initially the request will be sending to that application server. Before saving that code, it has to do some necessary verification so that here it will be sending the code to the application server. In application server, we have two components are available here. Application server contains two components. First one, Apex compiler. Second one, Apex runtime engine. Two components are available. So what exactly is Apex compiler? Basically, as an Apex compiler is going to be taking care of compiling your code. Compiling the code means what? It will check line by line syntax. Whatever the code that you have prepared, whatever the logic that you have written, it will check in that logic do we have any syntactical mistakes available or not? Is the logic is correct or not? What are the statements we have prepared? These statements have been prepared based on the rules, principles, standards, guidelines of Apex programming language or not. It will verify all these things. Now, in this case, upon checking this line by line syntax by the Apex compiler, suppose in any of the line, if there is any syntactical mistakes has been identified, immediately it will send that response back to the developer. Dear developer, inside your code we have found some syntactical mistakes, so we can't go ahead. Okay, we can't go ahead. We can't save your code inside that metadata repository. We can't run your code. So please go through the code. These are the lines where exactly did some mistakes. So that please correct the code, rectify the code, modify the code, and resubmit the code for recompilation processing again. So now in this case here, observe this one. Upon compiling the code, if there is any compilation errors are available, immediately it will send the response back to the developer to modify that code. That means what? Until or unless your code is not compiled perfectly, then it won't save the code into the metadata repository. Only the compiled code, only the quality code, only the error-free code will be storing inside metadata repository here. Okay, why? Because suppose for example, if it is saving that okay error code also inside that metadata repository, when you try to execute the code through this Apex runtime engine, at the time of execution, if it is causing some major issues, because of the major issues, if the cloud server is affected, then all the customers will be getting affected automatically, because that already we know Salesforce is not providing a dedicated server for each customer. Salesforce maintains shared infrastructure. So now within a single server, it is allocating the memory space for so many organizations. How many organizations are available within a single server? 8,000. We are having 8,000 organizations within a single server. So because of my code, if the cloud server has been affected, then all the 8,000 customers applications and the business will be getting impacted automatically. That's what here, until or unless your code is not compiled perfectly, your code will not be storing into the metadata repository. Only the compiled code, only the error free code and the quality code will be storing inside the metadata repository here. Okay, now that's what here, upon compiling the code, if there is any syntactical mistakes has been identified, immediately it will send the response back to the developer with the compilation errors information. Now, as a developer, we have to open that file Apex class code, we have to modify the code and then rectify the code and resubmit the code for recompilation processing. Okay, understood the concept here? Now, in this case, second time, whenever I'm going to be compiling this piece of code, again it will start compiling from line 1 to till line last. Okay, all the lines of code it will verify. Now, in this case, if there is no syntactical mistakes are available, if there is no syntactical mistakes are available, now this compiled Apex code will be storing inside metadata repository. So, metadata repository is a location or a place where exactly all your compiled Apex classes and the triggers, Visual Force pages, web services, APIs, batch classes, schedule classes, everything will be getting resides. So that here only the compiled code will be placing inside the metadata repository over here. Now, in this case, once Apex class has been stored inside this metadata repository, along with the one copy of the class code will be storing inside an object called as Apex class object. Apex class object. Now, Apex class is a standard object in Salesforce. Apex class is a standard object in Salesforce which holds all the Apex classes information. Like, for example, we have account object. Account object contains what? Account records. We have lead object. What it contains? Lead records. We have case object. What it contains? Case records. We have user object. What it contains? User records. Like the similar way, to store all the Apex classes of these users, it will be using an object called as Apex class object. Apex class is a standard object in Salesforce which contains all the Apex classes information here. How do you know whether it is an Apex class or Apex trigger? Based on extension? If it is .apxc, that means it's a class, it's an Apex class. If it is a trigger, it will be having .apxt. T means a trigger. Okay, so now depends upon that, it will be storing in the respective objects over here. Now, so now whatever the Apex class that you have prepared, if the code has been compiled successfully, then the compiled code will be storing inside the metadata repository, along with one copy of that Apex class code will store inside an object called as Apex class object. Clear up to this one? Now, so once the code has been stored inside the metadata repository, immediately Apex compiler will be informing to the Apex runtime engine, dear runtime engine, just now I have compiled an Apex class code. This is that okay Apex class name and the code already have placed inside the metadata repository. So based on this class name, bring the code from the metadata repository, execute the code, generate the result, and send the response back to the developer. So that here Apex compiler will be sending one indication to the Apex runtime engine. Now Apex runtime engine will be collecting the indication. Based on the indication, it is going to making a request to the metadata repository. Dear metadata repository, I want to collect the Apex class code. So it will send a request for the compiled Apex class code. As soon as the request has been sent to the metadata repository will be searching for the class. It will collect the class code. It will be sending that requested class code back to the Apex runtime engine. It will send the code back to the Apex runtime engine. Now, the Apex runtime engine will be loading that class code inside the temporary memory. It will load the class code inside the temporary memory here. Once the code has been stored inside the temporary memory, then it will start executing that code. Okay, it will be executing the code. Now, upon executing the code, inside the code, you may have written some DML statements. You may have written some SOQL queries. You may have written some SOSL queries. You may have written some batch classes also, which are going to be connecting to the database. Because SOQL queries are for what? To get the data from the database. DML statements are used to insert some record to the database. So that here, so now upon executing that piece of code, it may needs to connect to the database also. For that one, it is interacting with the database as well. Now tell me, what is the database for Salesforce? Database.com. Database.com is the own database of Salesforce. Salesforce people are not using Oracle, they are not using SQL Server. Salesforce people are using their own database that is called as database.com, which contains all your Salesforce objects and the records. Whatever the Salesforce objects that we have, including standard, including custom, all the objects and along with the records will be storing inside the database.com. So database.com is the customized database of Salesforce. so that upon executing this a piece of code, it may needs to interact with the database that come also, it will perform the operations. Once operations has been done, it will be generating some results. It will be generating the result. Once the result has been generated, now these results I would like to send to the user. Where the user can see the result inside the command prompt? No. The user has to see the result inside a browser because it's purely a cloud based application. We don't have local environments. We don't have any command prompts, nothing. Because when you go to other programming languages like C programming, C++, Java, .NET, everywhere we can see the results at the command prompt. But now in Salesforce, we don't have any command prompt concept over here. Everything is purely cloud just by using browser internet access. We are writing the code inside the browser. We are compiling the code through the browser. We can execute the code through the browser. We can see the results also inside the browser itself. So now in this case, whatever the results has been generated, those results will be sending back to the developer. So in that case, developer should be able to see that results inside the browser. If you want to see some content inside the browser, that content will be in the form of HTML format. Only the HTML formatted of content we can see in the browser so that the results will be converting into HTML format. This HTML format of response will be sending back to the developer, okay, in the form of a log file called as debug log file. Whatever the result has been generated, the result will be represented in the form of HTML format of response. This HTML formatted code will be sending to the developer in the form of a file called as a debug log file. So this debug log file will be holding the result of your program. It contains your complete program execution history. So whatever the code that we have compiled, whatever the code we have executed, the complete program compilation and the execution history will be available inside the debug log file. So which user has executed this code, which user has invoked this code, where they have written this code, how much CPU cycle time they have used, how much heap memory they have consumed, how many DML statements they have used, how many SO cable queries they have used, how many SOSL queries they have used, and how many batch classes they have invoked, how many email notifications they have sent, everything, the whole information will be tracking by Salesforce inside this debug log file. So in this debug log file, your program result will be available here. So now that result we can able to see inside your browser. Okay, understand the concept over here? Now, this is the execution lifecycle of your Apex program. So Apex program code should be get compiled by using the Apex compiler. It should be executed with the help of a runtime engine called as Apex runtime engine. The compiled Apex code will be storing inside the metadata repository, and we can see the result inside the debug log file. So whatever the Apex code that we are going to prepare, each Apex class code will store inside a file with the extension .apexc. All the Apex classes information will store inside an object called as Apex class object. Apex class is a standard object in Salesforce which contains all the Apex classes information which we have prepared in the past. Okay, understand the concept here? Now, make a note of this one. Apex programming execution lifecycle. Now, each Apex class code should get compiled and executed inside the force.com platform, which contains all the required resources for the Apex execution. Each Apex class code should get compiled by using Apex compiler and will get executed by using a runtime engine called as Apex runtime engine. Called as Apex runtime engine. The compiled Apex class code will get resides inside the metadata repository and a copy of the code will get stored inside the Apex class object. Apex class object. Now, metadata repository is a location where all the compiled Apex classes, triggers, batch classes, schedule classes, Visual First pages, web services, and APIs will get resides. Now, each Apex class code will get stored inside the file with the extension .apexc. Now, once the program execution has been done, then Apex runtime engine will place the results inside a log file called as debug log file, which contains the complete program execution history. Done with these points? Done everyone? Now, so let's see. So by using this Apex programming, we can write your Apex programming code in order to implement your own custom business logics. But in this case, whenever I'm writing the piece of code in Apex programming, each and every character will be counting by Salesforce. Salesforce will count each and every character inside your code because Salesforce has given the limitation that upon writing the code within an organization, not especially for an application here, including for all the applications also within the entire organization, we can write maximum of 60 lakhs characters code, not more than that. 60 lakhs characters code. So, whenever we are writing the code by using this Apex programming language within an organization, we can write maximum of 60 lakhs characters code, not more than that. So that's what here Salesforce is providing very limited development because that's what I told you in Salesforce development part will be very very minimal when compared with other programming languages like as a Java, .NET everywhere. When you go to Java, .NET, from day one onwards they will be start creating the classes and they're writing the business logic through programming. It's completely programming, 100% programming as part of Java and .NET. But when coming to the Salesforce, okay, since almost okay last 50 days, we haven't touched even a single line of code. Till now, we haven't written even a single line of code because most of the functionalities we have implemented with the help of mouse clicks. Just by using the navigation process, we are able to build so many things without writing even a single line of code. So now there are some exceptional cases where we need some complex functionalities. We need some complex business logics. At that time, we need to come to the development part through Apex programming so we can write that piece of code. So that here in Salesforce, they have given very limited number of characters to be allowed, that is 60 lakhs characters, not more than that. Okay, maximum of 60 lakhs characters code that we can write within an organization, including for all the applications also whatever, we can write maximum 60 lakhs characters, so that upon writing the code, don't come to the development always. Whenever we got a new requirement from any client also, any project also, don't come to the development part directly. Even though you are having expert level knowledge in the development, even though you are having good programming skills, don't come to the development here. Go to the admin part. Check that whether this feature can be possible to implement through admin features or not. If yes, then go with the admin part, develop these features over here by using mouse clicks. Suppose if this feature is not at all possible through configuration, then only we have to come to the development here. Okay, then only we have to come to the development. Okay, now, so now here in this case here, you can raise a question, sir, we are implementing the code or we are implementing the functionality either admin or development. What is the difference here? Client won't accept. Client won't accept here because for admin part billing is different, for development part billing is different. That means suppose if you are working for a project, if you are working on the requirement which is for admin part, then whatever the work that you did, for each hour client will be paying $100 per hour for admin related task. $100 per hour to the company. Now suppose if you are working for a development related task, client will pay $160 per hour. $160 per hour. So now the billing will be different, right? The why the client will waste the money? they won't waste the money here. Whenever we are implementing the feature by using programming especially, then compulsorily we have to give the justification to the client. Client will ask you the justification first, why you are going for development. Is it not possible through admin? Then we have to give the justification, boss. This is what our requirement. We don't have any feature in Salesforce configuration to implement the feature through mouse clicks. So that compulsorily we have to write in the form of development. So in development, we have to prepare the code by using Apex programming. So I need some 8 hours of time to complete this. So based on your justification, client will be giving the approval, or else client won't approve that. He won't approve the billing. Okay, so that here whenever we are writing the code, whenever we are getting any requirement from any client, first of all think in admin part whether it is possible through configuration or not. If it is possible, then go with the admin part. If it is not at all possible, then only you can come to the development part over here by giving the proper justification to the client. Okay, or else client blindly won't approve the budget over here. Okay, now, so in this case, Salesforce is going to be counting each and every character also. So maximum we can write 60 lakhs of characters code within an organization for all the applications also. Now, so now in this case here, you can raise a question, sir, do we have any chance to extend this number of characters? Yes, there is a possibility. Suppose if it is a free developer edition, for the free developer edition, okay, we don't have any extensions here. That 60 lakhs will be the max, not more than that. We can't extend it. Suppose if you are using enterprise edition, okay, enterprise edition, or if you are using some unlimited edition, then we can extend the number of characters, okay, from 60 lakhs to 1 crore also, or 1.5 crore characters also here, or 2 crores also. We can extend the number of characters by contacting your Salesforce administrator. You no need to contact the Salesforce.com support team in your project. In your team, one person will be acting like as a Salesforce administrator. Contact that Salesforce administrator and we can request them to extend the number of characters from 60 lakhs to 1 crore or 1.5 crore or 2 crores. Depends upon the project, depends upon the modules which you are going to implement. We can extend the number of characters also. That is possible only in paid editions, the two in enterprise edition and limited edition. Why? Because that already we know that. In our starting sessions, we have discussed the 4 paid editions are available from Salesforce, like a starter edition, professional edition,